The big story overnight is the Express's lead. They're telling us about Putin's alleged threat to kill Boris Johnson during a phone call after he'd gone to Kiev shortly before war broke out in Ukraine last February, about 2 or 3 weeks before it actually started off. The paper reports the Russian president told the then Prime Minister that, quote, with a missile it would only take a minute. Well, we're joined now by the Mail's Andrew Pearce and the Mirror's Kevin Maguire. I mean, I was saying to Louisa James, our political correspondent, earlier, this is pure Cray twin stuff. I could have you taken out, mate. I could have you killed. No problem. This is the authentic voice of a thug talking, isn't it?
It is. He's a gangster. Yeah. I mean, and we shouldn't forget he was masterminded the killing of British people with the Novichok in Salisbury. And he tried to kill a former Russian agent, but somebody completely innocent was killed as a result. He doesn't operate by usual rules. He is a gangster. He's a war criminal. And I genuinely believe, some people say Boris Johnson has problems with the truth sometimes. I completely believe what he said there in that interview.
No, even
completely plausible.
Even a liar will tell the truth sometime, and I'm not doubting this at all by Johnson. You can just see the menace, dripping with menace from Putin. He might have said it in a kind of jokey aside way.
Not very funny, though.
But Johnson knew what he meant, and of course, it's horrific. You see what he is doing in Ukraine, which really is what he did with other parts of Ukraine in 2014, what he did in Chechnya. You mentioned the Salisbury poisonings. No,
yeah,
I mean,
the number of people who do end up dead,
opposition
who are opposition,
usually at the bottom of a high building,
critics of Vladimir Putin. It's never an idle threat, is it?
And some of the generals who've been leading his botched military operation in Ukraine, suddenly they're no longer doing the job. Are they ever seen again? Probably not.
But although we presumably wouldn't believe that it was meant literally as
I think it probably was, Richard.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do. What? Well, he's broken all the rules in international warfare. He's invaded. It's a naked act of aggression and provocation. I think he would. And how would we know if it was? How would we know if it was him?
But the context, I think, is when Johnson or the foreign leaders visit Ukraine. Then you could get a missile strike, and you could say, "Oh, it was an accident."
Yes.
But there again, let's be honest. The Americans and the West, although the European countries have not had a great record throughout history as well. So in that sense, Putin is not just a one-off.
No.
When you consider what the Americans used to do, certainly trying to assassinate leaders or assassinate them.
What do we think of Boris's reasons for raising this now?
The timing of it.
Well, it's a programme about Ukraine, isn't it? And it is the first anniversary now of the invasion. But it's put him right back on the front pages again, eclipsing Rishi Sunak, and I'm sure that wouldn't be his motivation.
I suspect Johnson is now kicking himself that he didn't save it for his
£5
million book. Yeah,
absolutely. That's what was my first reaction. Wow, I thought that would be the big
reveal.
But there can be so much more in that book, because he's well into it.
Yeah.
Plenty to write about.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has plenty to worry about. What do you think, Kevin, is the truth about Nadhim Zahawi and what he told Rishi Sunak? Remember the time when Rishi Sunak stood up in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's questions and says, I know everything, there's nothing more to say, and then was forced to actually have an inquiry into Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs and then sacks him after that. It just doesn't reflect very well on the Prime Minister that he didn't have the full picture from someone so senior in the first place, or he did have more of the picture.
No, that's right. When he gave Zahawi a clean bill of health the week before last, about 12 days ago, at Prime Minister's questions, I listened, I thought, that's a hostage to fortune. So he's either been incredibly naive and incurious, or he's dithered, or he's been part of a cover-up if, as is claimed and denied by Number 10, that he was warned there'd be reputational damage from Zahawi, because the reports about Zahawi's tax affairs surfaced summer last year. Yeah, and of course, the inquiry report is utterly devastating, with the 7 breaches of the ministerial code, including untrue public statements from Zahawi, who thinks he's not under investigation, just having a little cosy chat.
Well, he must have known he was under investigation.
He thought, they were just making inquiries. That's not the same as an investigation. Look, he's a very clever man with a huge fortune. He made a lot of money before he became an MP in 2010. My understanding, and I talked about this a lot to people yesterday, and I've done a big piece of the Mail about it today, the Prime Minister was not told by Nadhim Zahawi that he had been fined £1 million. Do
you think he asked
by HMRC?
But that's the question.
Do you think he asked him?
I don't. Well, if he did ask him, he lied. I think he didn't ask the question.
So, OK, hang on. If he asked him directly, then he denied it, then he was lying.
Yeah.
An active lie.
Yeah.
If he didn't actually ask him that specific question, will you find, then it was a lie by omission.
Well, and what he did, it's the permanent secretary in the cabinet. The cabinet secretary, Simon Case, does all this heavy lifting, asks all the questions, and he clearly didn't think there was a problem. So when he became Chancellor of the Exchequer under Boris Johnson, when he became a cabinet minister under Liz Truss, this issue was there around then. So twice he got away with getting a ministerial job with that in the background, and then again when Rishi made him. But
you've got to look at the position of Sunak, who is weak. He's called hopelessly weak by Keir Starmer, and I think there's some truth in that because he was never elected. He was desperate to avoid a contest among Tory MPs when he's replacing Liz Truss. He's not yet 100 days.
Thursday.
He lost Gavin Williamson over bullying allegations. Cabinet Minister should never have given him a job. Everybody knew about Gavin Williamson, as well as being utterly hopeless. You've got the case now of Zawahiri. You've got questions over his deputy, Dominic Raab, and bullying and further investigation. And you've got the fact that he did that dirty deal with Suella Braverman, brought her back as Home Secretary after she'd been sacked for security breaches. There she is, in post in six days. I think he's got huge errors of judgment, Sunak.
As you say, the report that was published yesterday on the basis for the sacking is coruscating. There hasn't been one as bad as that I can remember.
No.
And it's absolutely unambiguous. And yet we've got front-page headlines in the Telegraph, for example, this morning. PM sacked Zahawa without a fair hearing.
Well, if you read that report by, what's his name, the ethics advisor, 4 pages, it is devastating, Laurie Magnus, and it says twice that Zahawi's standard fell way below the standard expected of ministers. Rishi Sunak read it and sacked him on the spot.
On the spot.
On the spot, and that was right. And the fact is, it's not an offence, I don't think, for a senior cabinet minister to have HMRC investigate you over a business deal you might have done 20 years ago. But you've got to be transparent, and if you've been fined, as he tried to say, for a genuine error, we heard from the boss of HMRC last week, you don't get fined by HMRC if you made a genuine error with your tax.
For an innocent.
Innocent error.
Zawahiri's on the tax-cutting right of the Tory party, so that bit of the party will just back him. But he himself, it was the most graceless resignation letter I recall, and really significant, because one, he doesn't apologise, no contrition, and then two, he attacks the media.
He blames us, the fourth estate.
And you know why?
Who did their job properly.
For exposing him. And he used to send the really heavy, threatening letters as he was denying the truth.
He was making threats of action for libel, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. And he dubbed the mere question that was there an investigation into his tax affairs a smear.
He did.
Which is a lie.
In a Kay Burley interview, that's right,
He did pick up on one headline in The Independent about the noose tightening, which they didn't mean literally around his neck. It's a form of words which some people now think we shouldn't use. I've probably used it myself in the...
But it's a great shame because he's one of the Cabinet's better performers.
I know.
He's good on the box, good on the radio,
he's
clever.
People like him.
People like him.
Are you surprised that this has come to light? Because I must be honest, I am. As you say, we've all interviewed him on this programme and in other places, and I'm very surprised that actually he's done this.
I know, and I wrote in the Mail today that friends of his told him when he was running for the Tory leadership last summer, make sure your business affairs are squeaky clean. Go through them line by line. And he said, I've got nothing to hide, everything's in order. It wasn't. The HMRC was investigating at the time.
He's very engaging, but trying to get him to tell the truth is like trying to nail a blancmange to a wall. He's not below incredibly dirty politics, such as when he said people going on strike, it was, they're aiding Putin. I thought that was an appalling way to view people who are really concerned about
the person who really nailed this jelly to the blancmange to the wall was Dan Needle, wasn't he? The tax lawyer and journalist.
Who got lots of legal letters from Zahawi.
Who really sort of pushed this story, dogged work by him.
Public interest journalism.
And one of the people who revealed Dan Needle's work was Carol Vorderman, who's become... she's on the warpath, isn't she? I mean, she's become the sort of unlikely campaigner on matters like this. And speaking on This Morning on Friday, she demanded that the Prime Minister reveal if he has shares in the vaccine manufacturer Moderna, given the government's huge investment during the pandemic. She said that man came out in front of 10 Downing Street as our Prime Minister and said accountability, transparency and, of course, integrity as well. Is this something, Kevin, that Rishi Sunak has to answer questions on?
Yeah, he was asked this. It first came to light in November 2020 from memory, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and a lot of money going into the programme. Of course, he finds he's an original founder of an investment fund which has a lot of shares in Moderna, which of course is getting a lot of money from the UK government. But we still don't know if he has shares or any ownership of that investment fund, because he said all his business dealings went into a blind trust, so he doesn't know what happens.
Yeah, he doesn't operate
ongoing.
it.
It's a system always used in government. I think it's less than transparent, because I think we should know, because you could think at the back of the mind of a minister making a decision is I will benefit from it financially.
Well,
I'm not saying he does.
No.
It's a long-standing way.
It's a legitimate question, isn't it?
Yeah, he has said he will publish his tax returns as Prime Minister by the end of the year. If he's if investments are coming in from Moderna, they may show up in his tax return.
But the thing, and I agree that the Prime Minister, Chancellor, opposition leader should publish their tax returns. But I think in the case of Zawahiri, as we would see, they would not show you anything, because he's just paid a £5 million. It wouldn't have been in his tax return.
What do you make of this morning's claims by friends of Rishi that a lot of the problems which he's going through at the moment, including this latest sacking, is because of the culture he inherited from Boris? What do you think?
Well, but the questions that should have been asked of Rishi when... of Zahawi when Rishi put him in the cabinet, should have been asked by Boris when he made him the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yes.
And that's when he cleared the debt, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, to be fair to Boris, he may have asked him, and he may have simply not got the honest reply.
Didn't get the full answer.
Yeah.
So it dates back to then. And I still think it's bizarre that the Chancellor of the Exchequer settles a £4-5 million tax bill when he's Chancellor.
But he has inherited some problems, but he's also making his own gross errors of judgment. One, giving Gavin Williamson a job, and then Williamson has to resign. Two, Zawahiri, he dithered for at least a fortnight, and it looked like a cover-up when he stood up in the House of Commons and said, everything's been answered, off you go. And it was only because of further media disclosures, particularly in The Guardian, about the amount of tax paid and the penalty, that he had to open the inquiry. He's looking the other way with Dominic Raab on the bullying. I think that's just going to come back and haunt us. So you can't just say it's all Johnson. There's also Sunak's rule as well.
Very briefly here, because we'll be talking about this in more detail a bit later in the programme.